What up, crackers? It's NEACE. Did you know 4 years ago there was this noob YouTuber and streamer by the name of NEACE with 3s and was a part of BingeGaming.tv? Well, despite his inability to brand himself, he actually made some cool videos time to time. One of which was he would take a new account and in 100 games or less, he would make Diamond and then post a guide on YouTube. Well, since I'm better than that NEACE guy, since I am NEACE, King of the Crackers, Cracker Kingdom, this will be the Tank KASSADIN Top Unsealed Spellbook, No Boots, Exhaust Barrier, 100 Games to Diamond Guide. And yes, I already did it with an account. I'm excited to share it with you early, mid, and late. And if you believe in KASSADIN, if you follow the Church of KASSADIN and at 22 minutes after getting abused and people doubting you, you will come back to grant many teabags onto your opponents. You will be an unkillable monster. Cannot wait to share it with you. Please like, comment, share, subscribe if you enjoy this. Let's do it. Alright, so before we go over the strategy of this build, we need to cover the runes and the origin story of this crazy idea. So there's this Korean challenger player by the name of, fuck it, I don't know. I don't speak Korean. I couldn't find his OPGG anymore, but basically, long story short, on the hardest server in the world, he would take KASSADIN Top with tank items, unsealed spellbook from the inspiration tree, and sorcery secondary, so a greedy rune page, and he would basically play passive, farm up, and then 1v9. Very strange strategy, very cool though. Perfect timing, biscuit delivery, time warp tonic is what we will be taking. A lot of corrupting pot starts here, obviously. Sorcery page, Transcendence, Gathering Storm. It's going to give us scaling, lots of mana, lots of CDR, lots of damage, everything we need. And for the actual runes, like the combat runes, we're going to be taking scaling CDR or attack speed, depending on how your farming's doing. And then you're going to take double armor if you're facing really aggressive lanes, like Renekton's and Kleds, bruiser types that are going to get in your face. If you get something a little bit lighter, you can go armor and scaling health. And obviously, if you're facing a lot of AP, you can just go magic resist and scaling health as well. All right, awesome. Let's move on. All right, so as you're learning Tank KASSADIN Top, I've got 3 basic rules for you to keep in mind. All right, the first one is prepare for the abuse, which is basically a worse version of abuse. You're going to be facing bruisers, and then everybody essentially beats you, but you have Exhaust Barrier, which will allow you to survive any dives under tower or outplay people. And if they get too crazy in a big wave of minions, you can just Exhaust Barrier and solo kill people sometimes, which pretty much can win the game if you know what you're doing. The second rule is do not waste mana spamming Riftwalk. Now, I know I'm going to tell you guys to buy a tier early in the early game strategy, which we'll cover in a bit, but I don't want you spamming your ult over and over again to get back to lane, because before you know it, if you go over 3 stacks on that R, you're going to waste all your mana and you're not going to be able to survive dives or outplay people. So don't overuse your mana. And rule number 3 is 22 minutes is when KASSADIN stops being a beta male. If you didn't solo kill people, if you're not snowballing, hang out for 22 minutes, stack up your tier, farm well, and you'll be nearing that 3-item power spike, Frozen Heart, Abyssal Mask, Seraph's Embrace, and you'll start 1v9ing around that point. All right, now let's move on to the early game strategy and give you guys some insight on how I play lane phases. So here's the early game strategy and a little bit of explanation on how to survive these crazy lane bullies in that massive long lane of top. You're basically going to be starting Q, but you're going to be maxing W. Obviously, you take a point in your Riftwalk along the way when it's available. The reason why we max W is more just because of the general damage it provides, and it also gives us an auto attack reset. The Q is not going to be providing a lot for us. Now, that said, if you're facing a lot of heavy AP, you can probably take a couple more points in Q if you need to. But most of the time, you're facing bruisers, AD bruisers. You're very rarely facing AP, and even if you do face AP, it gets a little overkill to take a bunch of points in Q, because realistically, you're playing for that big late game power spike anyway, and you're not going to be harassing or poking people out of lane too often with Tank KASSADIN Top. Your items, you're going to be starting Corrupting Pot, you're going to be building tier. Now, it's going to be Frozen Heart or Abyssal Mask, depending on the matchup. Remember, you don't need boots with the strategy. I know it sounds crazy. I know it sounds weird. Remember, that's just what we do. The wave strategy, freeze the wave if it's allowed. But if you're forced to push out, someone jams a big wave under your tower, your wave builds and then pushes back out towards the enemy turret, try very hard to stay on those big waves. And if you just get bullied or all in, then you kind of just have to commit and use your exhaust, barrier, whatever summoners that you have available. Now, I didn't write it down here, but you also need to remember that as you unlock those summoner swaps, you can switch to teleport and teleport back to lane. Heck, as you unlock more summoner swaps, you can even just ghost to lane just to keep using those summoners as fast as they come out, because sometimes you don't even have to use them. But you need to try to swap to as many as possible, as quickly as possible, so that you can keep swapping throughout the game. And that's going to allow you, as you scale up, you're going to be able to use all those summoners later, quickly and efficiently. All right, let's move to mid game. Okay, so I'm viewing mid-game as that time where people group in the middle of the map and start sieging towers, and top laners and bot laners get to choose whether or not they leave those side lanes. That's what I'm thinking about mid-game. Also, when you don't have a lot of items finished yet. So, as you're building out those big ticket items, if you were unpressured early and your opponent's weaker, start looking to solo kill with your ultimate. Remember that you can rift walk on top of somebody, auto attack, W, E, and then kind of assess the trade and see if you can win. You'll have combat summoners still, so you'll have exhaust. You can have exhaust, ignite, heal, ignite, a bunch of stuff, barrier, ignite. You can do a ton of crazy stuff with those summoners if people aren't really pressuring you that hard, or the jungler's at the bottom side of the map. If your opponent's weak, now's the time to start really looking for those opportunities, because you can do quick trades and then all of a sudden they really can't fight back. Pressure the side lane. You are KASSADIN. You don't need to group in the mid game. You don't want to group in the mid game. There's really no point. The only time that you should be grouping is to clean up a team fight. Maybe you flank in after people are low, but you don't go anywhere near a team fight unless it looks like something that you can clean up very quickly. But again, do not group. Big no-no for top laners with KASSADIN tank especially. Remember, sometimes the pressure is enough. So let's say that we're pushing a side lane, Master Yi jungle shows up and presses ult and starts running at you in a straight line. Instead of panicking trying to 1v1 him, or same thing with Aurelia, instead of panicking trying to 1v1 them, just pop your barrier if you need to, hop over the wall and peace out. Sometimes just drawing that map pressure as you scale and then surviving, maybe you pull two people to the side lane. In the mid game, that's a win with KASSADIN, because that means you're not losing and you're scaling. And trust me when I say KASSADIN has, with this tank build, some of the craziest scaling I've ever seen. It is no joke. All right, now let's move on to the late game and talk about what we should start doing once we get our big items. We are now in late game. You have been a boost by Renekton top. Your team has been flaming you for the entire game, but you have your 3-item power spike. You have Abyssal Mask, you have Frozen Heart, you have Archangel's Staff that you stacked up the whole game. Guess what? It's time to punish. You are king of the teabags, KASSADIN tank top. Okay? This is what happens when you believe, bless up, in the Church of KASSADIN. Alright? You are the final boss. You will have lots of summoners by now if you've been using that summoner swap throughout the game. So now it's time to start jumping into fights, using that active from Seraphs, using your exhaust, using your ignite, using your heal. You start looking to find those fights and be confident. And remember to use the W to get the W. Okay? Your mana problems do not exist with this build. W champions to rift walk again. So essentially all you have to do, rift walk on somebody, and you can kind of stack up that rift walk preemptively. And if you land on an enemy champion, which by the way you can swap to flash and just do a massive engage on a squishy, guess what that means? You can now W, auto attack W, reset your rift walk, and keep doing it again. It is virtually uncounterable. There's no counterplay to this once you finally built out. And that is why this strategy is so effective and so nutty. The power spike is unlike anything I've ever seen with any champion ever. All right, so start looking for those awesome fights. Start looking for those 1v1s that people won't expect, and you'll probably get KASSADIN banned in the following games if you do it right. Now you guys know it would not be right to leave this guide without answering some frequently asked questions in advance. Hey man, I got a question for you, man. So every time I try to do this tank KASSADIN shit, man, my team feeds. You can't tell me that you can play tank KASSADIN top and carry your team when they're feeding fucking goddamn 15 kills in 30 seconds. I can't do this shit, man. I mean, yeah, sometimes a team will be so bad that your game will be over before you can even get items on the map, in which case, yeah, that's the risk of this strategy. However, some people just don't play aggressive once they start getting those big ticket items, and they kind of still play timid. Like your tank Kassadin, you're going to have exhaust and barrier and all sorts of stuff. And if you couple that with Seraph's Embrace in the late game, you are damn near impossible to kill. Like you can just hard engage a squishy and no one can stop you. So remember that this is a big late game investment, and if you're not using it to actually do something in the late game, it's gonna feel like your teams are holding you back, but you have to create space once you get those items.
Like I'm a pretty good player myself. I've been playing this game since season 2. And I don't understand why this would work in top better than just going into mid in the first place. I mean, you think you know what you're doing as a YouTuber, but you're kind of trash. You're honestly kind of dog shit. You're kind of dog, man. Like Wolf, dude. Like Bow Wow.
After doing this strategy, I am pretty much 100% convinced and sold that tank Kassadin top is actually a better solo queue strategy for getting a higher win rate than Kassadin mid. Purely off of the fact that when you play Kassadin mid, you're expected to help with scuttles on both the tops and bottom sides of the map, and additionally, you're expected to help with that first dragon fight, and early 2v2s are atrocious with Kassadin mid. So honestly, it makes more sense to pull Kassadin off into the top side, let him kind of farm up and chill, and be this huge late game threat. And it kind of goes into my opinion that top lane is all about being a big solo lane split push threat as the game drags on. A la Tryndamere, Jax, Fiora. Tank Kassadin actually does kind of fit into that mold nicely. So don't sleep on it. It's pretty legit. Alright guys, and this concludes the 100 games to Diamond, Tank, Top, Kassadin Guide, Exhaust Barrier, No Boots, Unsealed Spellbook, Big Dick and Tea Baggin' Church of Kassadin strategy. Alright, if you enjoyed this, please like, comment, share, subscribe. Let me know what you thought of it in the comments. Are you glad to see this series back? What champions would you like to see in the 100 Games to Diamond series? I've got a couple lined up, but I'm still very curious to see what you guys would like me to try to climb to Diamond with. Alright, I love you guys. Thank you so much. And I'm out. Peace. Crackers, love you guys. See you next time.